Hello and welcome to the Pages to Pixels podcast, where we talk about new movies every week. I'm Rohan,
I'm Kirtana.
and today we're actually going to be talking about Bong Joon-ho's new movie, his follow-up after uh, Oscar-winning Parasite, Mickey 17, which, it stars Robert Pattinson. It's basically about a guy, he dies, and then he gets remade every time he dies, so they can keep experimenting on him. And it's called Mickey 17 because his name is Mickey, and it's the 17th version of him. Uh,
I had very high expectations going in after Parasite.
as did I.
Yeah. I thought it was a good movie. I don't think it hit all the same notes as Parasite did for me. This just felt like a very diluted version of Bong Joon-ho's voice to me.
Oh, I disagree on it being diluted. I feel like it is very different um than Parasite. And I know you mentioned in the past the difference between his American films and his Korean films. And if you watch them, it does feel like in his Korean films, he's being a really sophisticated kind of filmmaker. He's making that stuff that you're like, okay, when it comes out, this is going to get a lot of awards buzz. This is going to be dissected in film schools worldwide. And then when he makes his American movies, it just feels like he's having fun.
I was gonna say, do you think he dumbs it down for the American audience?
I don't
For
think he
us?
dumps it down. I think he just makes a very different type of movie. It might just be because of the budget that he's getting.
Mhm.
Maybe he doesn't have this budget in Korea to do these big, um, like sci-fi spectacles.
I mean, this film did look very good.
Mhm.
Um, it was very, very well made. I really like you know how when we watch like these larger than life like sci-fi fantasy films, like almost always there'll be like this one section of the film which just doesn't look good. Uh,
Yeah.
this didn't have a single one of those. Like even the alien like creepers that they created, it
Yeah.
was very, very well done. Huh?
Yeah. PG on them was really good.
Yeah. No, it really was. It was excellent. It was a very interesting viewing experience. I did think it was a tad too long for me. I felt myself feeling some fatigue. I want to say at the back half of like Act Two, like around low point essentially. But yeah, no, it was a fun watch. It was extremely interesting. Like it was a gold mine. I thought there's so much that could have been done. You know, stemming from like this idea of this guy whose body gets reprinted.
Mhm.
And I quite like the direction they took it in. Like the escalations all made sense. I really liked Robert Pattinson's performance in it.
Oh, I
Uh,
loved him.
he was so good. I think everybody was good. I also thought Mark Ruffalo was great. Like he got on my nerves.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, after Poor Things in this, like I feel like he's found his little bubble that he clearly thrives in.
I
Um,
mean, Mark Ruffalo's been doing pretty well for a long time, so let's not say he's found his area. I mean,
But you know what I mean? It's a very specific niche kind of a character. Like it's
yeah.
like that character just sits in that little space where you just like hate him.
Mhm.
I thought he did really, really well with that.
Yeah, I feel
Um,
like he's added that to his repertoire.
mhm. I will. I. Yeah. No. It really worked for me. Like his character definitely worked for me.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think Robert Pattinson is delivering an awesome performance. He is just towing that line of if he went a little bit further, especially with the 17 version of himself and not the 18 version of himself. But if he just went a little bit further, it could have gone into the realm of way too silly and
Mhm.
um feeling like he's in a different movie. But I think he walks that line just
Really well. Yeah. I mean, like I wouldn't have thought like when I watched him as Edward from Twilight that his filmography was going to get this
oh
much
yeah.
like this wide and like become this exponentially better, you know?
I think he's becoming one of my favorite actors because I know that yeah, because for me what it is with him is regardless of what my thoughts on the movie is going to be, I know that there's going to be something just interesting either about the movie itself or with his performance, or both. You know, it's really like him and Willem Dafoe that get that feeling from.
In terms of the screenplay, I thought it was very interesting. I thought the pacing was a little inconsistent, from what I saw. But the dialogue worked really well for me. Like the dark humor was very spot on. Um, I'm not a gory violence is funny kind of person, but this movie I think like tread that line well enough that I was able to enjoy it.
Yeah,
Um,
mm. Yeah, I agree. I think there are definitely some issues with the story. I think my major issues is that um, certain threads are opened, but then they never get fully closed. The character of Kai, where she's introduced as potential love interest rival, but then she disappears for a long time, and then she comes back, and you think of her as like an ally, but then she does end up siding with Mark Ruffalo because she tries to report 17 and 18 existing together,
mhm.
and then she kind of disappears, and then at the end we see her in the ceremony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of confusing what her motivations are and what she really
Mhm.
wants out of a whole
Yeah.
experiment.
And
I thought
then,
another sorry, go ahead.
no, I mean, the other one I was going to bring up is not really an open thread, but the Stephen Yeun character. I do think he's one of those characters that, I mean, I always enjoy seeing Stephen Yeun, but if you take him out of the movie, not much changes.
Yeah, I actually also thought that that was the case with the whole like 17 and 18 debate. Like, I know that 18 at the end like finishes his arc and he sacrifices himself in this glorious ball of fire.
Mhm.
But I kind of feel like I was essentially so when I was saying that I got fatiguing towards the back half of like Act Two, at low point when like they're all captured and they're in that big like sequence with Mark Ruffalo, right? I thought that was the biggest bump in the entire film for me because it was a great scene, but I thought that the way they were kind of talking about all of it with like, you know, the natives and the settlers and all of that, the dialogue was just a little cheesy and on the face for me. It felt a little dramatic. Like without much subtext. Following that, I feel like at that point of the film, like I was a little more invested in the whole like 17 versus 18 um like fight for survival than I was in the larger picture. And I understand that that scene is kind of where the flip is supposed to happen. But for me, like even at the end of that scene, I was still more curious to see which of the two of them were going to survive than whether, you know, the alien race was going to eat them up or whatever. Because I feel like I kind of knew all along that Mark Ruffalo's character was going to die and that um, the right side was going to win. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like that's why that scene didn't work for me because it felt very long drawn and it was hard to stay invested when I kind of already could tell the result.
Mhm. So yeah, see, I disagree because I still think like I disagree on the dialogue being bad. It felt like it was in line with the rest of the movie. So like
Mm-hmm.
I think if you like I think I understand your point if you have an issue with the dialogue in the entire film. Um but that specific scene didn't really stand out to me as being like poor in dialogue. I get what you're saying about hey more 17 versus 18 is more interesting, but then I feel like by then they were already allies, even if they're begrudgingly um
Mm-hmm.
allies
Right.
and they don't really like each other. I feel like they were already on that same page because at the end of because then now they're both trying to not get permanently
Killed.
deleted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Um, I mean, I'm not surprised you disagree. This is not new.
Yeah.
I'm glad it worked for you. Um, what do you think about the whole like them like making this device that could translate from the alien language to
Yeah, that
English?
was a little I thought that was a little too quick. Um
Convenient, right?
yeah, it
Mhm.
was I think that's my biggest or one of my biggest issues because they didn't really feel like they had that much data. There was a
Mhm.
couple of encounters and then Mickey met them uh, or at one time where he was supposed to die. I think if they had set it up earlier, I
Mhm.
think it would have
Mhm.
been a little bit better, but then they kind of set it up like 5 minutes before it's completed.
Right. I did wonder if maybe some of that storyline was lost in the edit because it kind of felt that way to me, like watching the final product. Like maybe scenes were there. Yeah. Especially because like when she runs up to him, there's that exchange between him, like Robert Pattinson and the scientist lady.
Mhm.
I feel like there was maybe more of the relationship there that got cut out, just in the way the dialogue in that scene flowed. I will say that the visuals of the aliens were not pleasant. I did not like it at all. Like, there's that one scene where it just goes over his body, and it was just, I just
Yeah,
couldn't.
I think it's
It-
meant to do that, because
yeah,
you're supposed to see it and you're supposed to assume that they are like evil. Um,
right. It's just, it was, yeah, I didn't
but
love that.
then yeah, but then when you actually got their personalities, it was kind of fun. They just it felt like wholesome. The conversation that 17 was having with the leader.
Mhm, mhm. No, it was very cool. Like I like the premise of it. I like the themes that they were going for. I thought that they did a pretty good job at executing it. Just the visuals was they were like I don't like the feeling of watching like a thing like yeah. But otherwise it was pretty fun. Um, were there any like standout elements for you?
Honestly, um I think that actually real quick before we move on, I do want to talk about something I didn't like, which is the ending. I think after they defeat the Mark Ruffalo character and at 18 um gives his sacrifices himself, you have that whole it cuts to 6 months later and they have like the ceremony where they're destroying the
Mhm.
machine. But then, and I think that's fine, but then you have all of that middle stuff where um, it's a legal debates of like, hey, this machine, and then it's outlawed everywhere, both on.
Can't wait to take that out of context and put it in the teaser.
um, and then also, I don't believe that all of that would happen in 6 months. First of all, do they have that council room on the ship, or is that on Earth?
I think that's on Earth.
Okay, because then so that implies that everyone is arrested, taken
Oh,
back
no,
to
no, no.
Earth.
Wait, that's on the ship. I'm thinking of the debate room. That's on Earth.
Okay,
Either way, I get your point. Yes, there's a
yeah,
logistical.
that's the debate room was what I'm talking about, where they had like everyone and where they had everyone sitting there. Oops.
Oh, so there's two, right? There's the one where everyone's in red.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking? Yeah, that's on the ship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I feel like there should have been more scenes in that room. Because originally, when we first see that room, it is before it's in the flashback sequence before Mickey is on the ship.
Mhm.
And then we never kind of see it again, and then we see it at the end. It's just it felt like a lot to happen. The movie made it feel like they were going back to Earth and then back to the colony, and I'm like, wait, it took them 4 months or 4 years
Earlier.
to get
Mhm.
there originally. How they go back to Earth and then back to the colony in 6 months? But obviously they don't go back. But then that is a thing that I don't think the movie makes very clear.
Mhm.
Yeah, and just referencing Earth, I think it could have just been way more streamlined. Like they elected a new leader. It was I can't remember the name of his girlfriend. It ended up being her, and then everyone voted, and they decided to destroy um, the machine on the
Mhm.
colony. And they can reference what's happening in Earth. They can say like, "Hey, we're also," and say like, "We're also advocating the end to this practice on Earth." I think
Mhm.
for 6 months, like there's no way that it would actually be banished.
Yeah, I mean, considering the pace at which we see things around us happen,
Yeah.
and when there's this much bureaucracy involved, I'm sure 6 months feels very unrealistic.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, I agree. I also that dream sequence kind of threw me off. I
Yeah.
wasn't really sure what it was intended to do because
Mhm.
unless I'm wrong, we don't really see him have like nightmares or like any of that stuff earlier on, right? Like the only time we ever see him have weird dreams is in this one particular like sequence.
He does. He does. Have. dreams about his mother.
I like the red button pressing thing. That was like a
Yep.
cool,
Mhm.
plan and a payoff.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and but I think overall in the whole movie, like the element that stood out to me was Robert Pattinson's performance. Um, he did such a good job of like
Yeah.
playing these two characters that are very similar but also wildly different.
Mhm.
And I think you're right when you said earlier on that he really tread the line between like going super silly and
Yeah.
like staying within the meter.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, no, it was fun. A lot of shirtless scenes, which I enjoyed. uh, yeah,
Yeah, I feel like they held back in that one threesome scene.
yes, they did.
I could have gone a lot further. Immediately, I
Yeah,
thought of challengers, but like way weirder.
yeah. No, it was great. I also thought that it was very smart how they used sex throughout the film. It felt very intentional, and there was like it didn't feel like they just did it to put it there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the number three, the plan payoff of bring the baby was great.
It was solid, yeah. That was cool. I did feel bad for that weird little thing as it was like
Yeah.
over the. So yeah, I guess they did a really good job of like making me care for this thing that I find disgusting.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah. How about you? Any elements stand out for you?
Yeah, I think because we talked about how the script was a bit uneven, and I'm gonna compare this movie um, to another movie that came out a few years ago, where people had issues with the script, and my response was, "I don't care," because the vibes of this movie are immaculate, which is Tenet. I think both Tenet and Mickey 17, which both of them starring Robert Pattinson, um,
Mm-hmm.
have some issues with the script. When you really break it down, there's
Mm-hmm.
things in Tenet where it's like ah, there's a ton of plot holes. Which anything involving time travel, you're gonna find a ton of
Right.
plot holes. And then of course we talked about it. Um, we talked about it with this film. At the end of the day, though, it's like yeah, you can break down, but I think just the vibes, and when I say vibes, I'm like it's the feeling that you get while watching the movie, whether it's an action scene, whether it's humor, um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, coming from the acting, coming from sometimes even just how it's shot. Um, it's like this movie had that whole dark humor thing going on, and it's like at the end of the day, I loved that. So even with some of the issues, you know, I can look past it. I mean, it's the same reason why people voted for Donald Trump. You can point, you can give them layers and you can give them detailed arguments about why what he's saying makes no sense. It doesn't matter though. It's
Right.
they
It's the
just
vibe.
yeah.
Yeah. You've actually mentioned this before in some of our earlier episodes where you talk about the macro versus the micro, where if the macro works, then the micro you are willing to look past it.
Yeah.
And I definitely see what you mean by that in the context of this particular film. A few days ago, this very famous like Tamil podcaster, she had on this like even more famous singer, like music composer on her podcast. And as they were talking, like he referenced one of his songs and she didn't know the lyrics. She was just like, I do it for the vibes. And the internet just tore her apart for that. They were just like, what do you mean you just listen to it for the vibes? Like she got so much hate about it. So it's very interesting that you chose those exact.
um, so as a reminder, or in case you're new, we do ratings on the script coverage scale. There is pass when we think a movie is not that great, consider when we think it's decent, and recommend when we really like this movie. As a reminder, this is not an actual recommendation, it's just how we score things here. So, with that said, how would you rate Mickey 17?
I would give it a consider. Um, the only reason I'm holding back on like a full-fledged recommend for me is because the runtime was just far too long.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a recommend. I think this is kind of what I want from big budget um, blockbusters, which I and maybe we can look this up, and if I'm wrong, then take it out. But I believe that this movie had a budget of 118 million,
Mhm.
which it does sound like a lot, But when you compare it to many other uh, many other films out there, especially kind of the big blockbusters, it's actually pretty low.
Mhm.
Um, there's a new Netflix movie called The Electric State. I think that movie has a budget of like 300 million or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah. And if you watch it, it doesn't feel like they made the most out of it. Uh,
Yeah.
so it's obviously still a big budget. Like most filmmakers would kill to get a budget like that. But I enjoy that there's another big budget movie being driven by Bong Joon-ho and not
Mhm.
executives trying to figure out like how do we make the most money as we can, and the director role is kind of irrelevant. Um,
I see what you mean. First thing is you were right about the numbers. It was 120 million, the budget. And considering the amount of VFX that went into this, I would
yeah.
say it's not that big budget. It's not
Mhm.
as big a budget as it feels like on paper. And they like big picture like SAG stars on it, so they shelled out a lot, I'm sure, in like acting fees. So
Mhm.
no, like it was a very well made movie for its scale. What would you recommend to someone who would enjoy a film like Mickey 17?
Yeah, so I'm gonna recommend a movie called Elysium. I've heard it pronounced Elysium also. I don't know which one exactly right. I've always said Elysium.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's a movie by Neil Blomkamp, and essentially it's about there's people live on Earth, and then kind of the richest people live in a space colony, and the main character Matt Damon needs some kind of health procedure done, but that procedure is not available on Earth. It's only available on the space colony. So it ends up being very much of an action movie, but that's still kind of going into the class disparities in healthcare and all that. So it's a pretty good movie.
This is so interesting because it's very similar to one of my features. Um, that's heartbreaking. No, but I'm also saying it's interesting because I was going to recommend Snowpiercer.
Yep,
Um,
also Bong
it-
Joon-ho.
yes, and it is an excellent film, and I watched that film because it was a comp to the feature I was writing, which is also about the healthcare system and class disparity. And yeah, so it's good to know it already exists. Uh, no, but I was going to recommend Snowpiercer because I think it's a great film. But also in that film, it's post-apocalyptic and there is a train that just goes really fast around the earth, and you can only survive if you're on the train. And essentially, how it works is the front of the train is the rich and wealthy people, and as you go back in the train, it becomes people from less privileged classes. And it's very similar themes of wealth disparity and
Mhm.
class, and it's a good commentary on our social structure.
Yeah.
So it is the watch to anyone who likes Bong Joon-ho's language and films.
Yeah, Snowpiercer is a great movie. And I'm just yeah, it feels like again, it's that disparity of the Korean versus the English film where the English
Mhm.
movies always feel like they're the bigger blockbuster, more fun, uh which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think I only dislike it um when it feels like it's not being driven by something interesting.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's a great film.
Mhm.
Definitely worth checking out.
Yeah.
Alrighty. What else have you been watching?
I've been watching Daredevil Born Again, which is kind of the Disney Plus version or sequel to the Netflix show. It's weird because Disney and all the actors in the show, which I'm assuming they're being told by Disney to say this, is they're insisting that this is not related to the Netflix Daredevil,
Mm-hmm.
but all the cast is back and they are referencing events that happened in seasons 1 through 3, but they say no, it's completely different. It's not the same guy. It's unrelated. I don't like it quite as much as the Netflix one. The Netflix one still feels a little bit more grounded, while this
Mm-hmm.
definitely feels like they're trying to go more into the MCU with the magic and some of the sci-fi. Not too much. It still feels more grounded than everything else in the MCU. But I think that original Netflix one was even more grounded, which is why I prefer that one. But it's still pretty good.
I have heard about the show and the exact thing that you brought up. It's turned into a bit of a meme on
Yeah.
the internet. I just started Severance. I just saw the pilot.
Yes, that
Um,
sounds great.
I have not been able to stop hearing about it, and I had watched a part of the pilot about 2 years ago when I was writing my thesis because it was a comp, and at that point I stepped away from it because it was getting a little too similar tonally, so I didn't want it to influence what I was writing. But I went back to it yesterday, and the pilot is great. I will continue watching the show.
Yeah, yeah, I think you'll like it quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. I know that I think season 2 is ending like this week, so I'll just be able to binge it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm pretty sure by the next episode, I will be done with the show. With that, we come to the end of this week's episode of the Pages to Pixels podcast. I'm Kirtana,
Nolan.
and we'll see you again next week with a brand new episode. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.